Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Have History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time I started the first Battle of Bull Run, covering the fight at Blackburn's Ford. Now I'm going to cover the fight for Matthews Hill. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. Pierre-Gustave Toutant Beauregard began getting reinforcements on July 19th, but most of them arrived on the 20th. They were a part of Joseph E. Johnston's army from the Shenandoah Valley. When Johnston arrived, Beauregard was now outranked by the Virginian, who would command all the forces. However, since Beauregard knew the ground, Johnston deferred a great deal of the plans to Beauregard. By the morning of July 21st, Union forces were now approaching Beauregard and Johnston along Bull Run. Irvin McDowell settled on holding the rebels in place at Mitchell's, Blackburn's, and other fords, while about half of the army crossed further to the north. Most of Daniel Tyler's division approached the stone bridge across Bull Run, and David Hunter's division moved toward Sudley Ford to threaten the Confederate left flank. Instead of arriving on the flank at around 7:30 a.m., Ambrose Burnside didn't reach it until after 9:30 a.m. Nathan Shanks Evans caught wind of what was happening and left 4 companies of the 4th South Carolina at the Stone Bridge and took the other 6 companies, along with the 1st Louisiana Battalion, to meet the foe. But he underestimated the flanking maneuver that the Union brigades were carrying out by going just a short distance to the north, but when he saw the columns of blue troops moving down the road, he quickly readjusted his line to Matthews Hill to confront the approaching Federals. Burnside deployed the 2nd Rhode Island against Evans. When the Confederates leveled their weapons and fired into the blue ranks, the inexperienced Union soldiers dropped to the ground to avoid the hail of lead. Burnside and Porter's men had marched for 7 hours and were exhausted. The Rhode Islanders' fight with the Louisianians and South Carolinians was used to rest the other units for about 30 minutes. The Rhode Island's commander, Colonel John Slocum, boldly exposed himself atop a fence to observe the rebel positions, and was hit 3 times, with one of the balls striking his head and carving a groove on his scalp from front to back. Captain William H. Reynolds' battery moved into position behind and to the right of the 2nd Rhode Island and delivered constant fire from their 6 guns. In the confusion, some of the South Carolinians were positioned behind the Louisianians, and they fired into their backs, injuring at least 2 men. The men from Louisiana returned the favor, but quickly the 2 regiments turned their rifles against the enemy. Hunter was frustrated with Burnside's delay and ordered Porter to deploy his troops, but Porter misunderstood the order and thought he was supposed to support Burnside, so he took up a position behind the engaged brigade. Around this time, Hunter was wounded and left the field. He put Burnside in command of the division, who threw his regiments in piecemeal against the enemy. He sent the 2nd New Hampshire to the west side of the road, where they did nothing to help the 2nd Rhode Island in their fight against Evans. To the south, elements of B's and Bartow's brigades occupied Henry Hill. Some of the men began to climb Miss Henry's apple tree to acquire some of the fruit, but Reynolds' artillery began throwing shells in their direction, and the men quickly slid down the tree. One Georgian wrote, "This is so unfair. I didn't come out here to fight this way. I wish the earth would crack open and let me drop in." Burnside ordered the 1st Rhode Island into battle, and for the 2nd Rhode Island to move to the left to make room for its sister regiment. These 2 regiments engaged with Evans' men in a prolonged fight. The Confederate brigade commander began to worry that he couldn't hold Matthews Hill against the overwhelming numbers now bearing down on him. He decided to try to even the situation by taking out the artillery. He ordered Major Wheat to charge Reynolds' battery, but the infiltrating fire from the 1st Rhode Island forced them to move to the west across the road to get to safety. Now Evans badly needed help from the 4 regiments behind him on Henry Hill. General B was reluctant to come to Evans' aid. He wanted him to fall back to Henry Hill, a location he deemed more defensible, but in the end, B led the 4th Alabama to the 4th South Carolina's right and quickly realized that he needed more troops. The 8th Georgia and 2nd Mississippi quickly joined their embattled comrades, with the 7th Georgia in reserve on the Warrenton Turnpike, in the dip between Matthews Hill and Henry Hill. The roar of battle consumed these regiments. One Georgian wrote, "Seemingly 1,000 rifles were flashing and the air was alive with whistling bullets. Men were dropping at my right and left. I could hear the ball striking our boys, and I saw many of them fall forward, some groaning in agony, others dropping dead without a word." Burnside needed reinforcements of his own and ordered Porter to send him the United States Infantry Battalion, a group of Army regulars under Major George Sykes. The fresh troops moved to the left of the 2nd Rhode Island, and after a lackluster first volley, delivered devastating rounds into the 8th Georgia, who began to give way. Bee convinced some of his men to stay and fight, but the regiment was falling apart. When the rest of Porter's brigade formed on the west side of the road and pressured the Confederate left, the Confederates gave way under the mountain pressure. The last to move off the field was the 4th Alabama, who, seeing a section of gray-clad troops approaching them from the east, mistook them for Confederates and moved toward them. It was actually Sherman's brigade, who had splashed across an unknown ford north of the Stone Bridge and was deploying on the field. A volley from Sherman's men sent the Alabamians toward Henry Hill. Beauregard's left flank was in serious trouble, especially since most of his troops were on the right. However, he was beginning to send more troops to the threatened sector, one of which was a former professor at the Virginia Military Institute. His name was Thomas Jonathan Jackson, who was leading a brigade of Virginians to Henry House Hill.